Greetings. Guten Tag, talo falava. And kia ora. No kia ora o tēnā koe. To the rest of the so-called, that's right, Kiwis that are used to the Māori language, or the te reo, is correct. You know, Aotearoa New Zealand, or I should say just New Zealand. Anyway, welcome to this evening's so-called preaching. Interesting. So what have I got to preach about, Archangel Warren? Yes, honey bun. Gainea tamlalama. This evening? Well, I think you all know what I'm going to preach about. What is my title, Dr. Snow Brown? Let me so-called Archangel Warren. Dr. Snow Brown? I am Dr. Snow Brown. I am a natural, noble pastor that is meek. Naturally, I'm ordained that way. I'm probably the only one that exists in your country and on this planet. So what have I got to preach about, Archangel Warren, this evening, being the 11th of November, 2022? Remind me again, how old am I? 50? 50 years old. Mine. You don't look too bad for a 50-year-old old bird. That's correct, Dr. Snow Brown. Well, first of all, I think you all know I am not happy at all with the outcome regarding my so-called application for discharge without conviction that I, just last, on Wednesday, on the 9th of November. I mean, it's very straightforward. So I thought, I think it's so crazy how this case is turning out to be. You should see the paperwork. You should see the amount of paperwork that I have accumulated from the 9th of June in terms of bail bond forms that I filled in. That's correct, with the specific special conditions, and also all that's right, all the forms, paperwork that I have collated and written up for the so-called application discharge without conviction, and in the last 38 pages, that's correct, although 18 trespass notices that I served. I had a very strong defense with 10 submissions, with 10 submissions, yes, indeed. The presiding judge decided to ignore my 10 submissions, but just took it from the facts of the case as it stands, the police facts, that's correct, and the prosecutor. I think what was really disappointing was the fact that the police had actually dictated to the outcome of your so-called application for discharge without conviction. I don't know, maybe it was pure out of jealousy. Was it out of jealousy that they didn't want me to, that's correct, to speak on my behalf? My God, but I mean, they don't exactly get paid to speak on my behalf, that's correct. I mean, how rude is that? I mean, for starters, I never told the prosecutor to speak on my behalf. I never gave him the so-called the talking mic on my behalf to represent me on the day, let alone to deal with my actual application. That's correct. Discharge without conviction. Because after all, I mean, I collated. I spent, hours. That's right. Collating that information. But I mean, the so-called complainant who entered the one willful trespass charge against me misused with the police, misused the trespass notice that I had supposedly served upon her, that taped on her door at her property. Did you know that, hey, Deborah thinks, that it's abnormal and insane, but abnormal for people to enter property to serve, She thinks it's rude for people to enter property, but I mean, or let's just say, she thinks that people shouldn't enter private properties. I know, it's ridiculous. especially if you're dealing with the service of the trespass notice. How do you suppose that's right, that the so-called person that you want to trespass from their private properties is going to get the trespass notice? Well, for starters, when you go to the police station, they will tell you exactly how a trespass notice is served. You got to complete the back of it. You got to serve it, face to face, in person. That's correct. And you've got to enter the property as well, and do all of that. It's pretty straightforward. But from my experience in the last so-called, say, 20 years, or even, about 14 years of serving trespass notices, especially in the last 8.5 years of serving trespass notices, here at this address, I've learned a lot. I've learned a great deal that a trespass notice could be served with so many ways, in so many ways. According to the context, according to the people that you're dealing with, depending on the people that you're dealing with, whether they be criminals or they be hardcore offenders or gang members or even elite people. That's right. You have to know how to serve a trespass notice. But I'll tell you what, when you're dealing with dangerous gang members and criminals, you don't ever want to serve a trespass notice face to face. That's correct. Especially if they have harmed you in some form or another, whether it be psychologically or physically. So the safest way to serve a trespass notice that way, to people like that you know are harmful and are associates of KUKM criminal organization, is to what? Is to either take them on their doors, that's great, put them in the mailbox, or send them via registered post. But it's expensive. It's expensive. You got 18 trespass notices and you got to serve them registered post. And a lot of the time, you might not even get there as well. I mean, you paid, all right. You don't need to provide the police proof that you'd served it via registered post. Why? Because it's silly. Once you serve it, you pay for it. That's great. Once you say on the back, that's good enough. That's good enough. It's completed on the back. You do not need to say that you need to have proof, because the proof is it's on its way. It's on its way. The proof is when once that trespass notice has been couriered away, that's correct, the other person will receive it. And the postie will sign it. That's great. Will receive the signature. So it's silly for them to expect that, you got to serve it face to face. No, you can't. You don't have to serve it face to face. If you read the back of the trespass notice, it tells you exactly the manner you could serve it: by handing it to them, by throwing it down on the ground at their feet. So that means you can extend those conditions. That's what I've discovered with serving my trespass notice. That, for example, the trespass notice that I just served on the 9th, that's correct, of November, just last gone, at 6:08 p.m. in the evening, to so-called Constable Stuart Bertram, Blake. That's correct. Now, I knew, I had a feeling that if I went there to the address, that he wasn't going to be there. So that was meant to be that way. It was meant to be that way. And also that somebody was waiting to receive the trespass notice. I knew that before I came to the address, because I've never been to his address before. That was the first time. This was the first time. That's correct. But at the back of my mind, I said, if he is going to be there, that's correct. Then whatever happens. That's correct. And my Archangel Warren, well, of course, he's the one that what? You encouraged me. That's great. We knew right away inside the courts that something had happened. It just clicked in my brain. That's correct. That Constable Stuart Blake had something to do with the outcome of your court case. That's correct. And I knew right away that is not right to do. He has no right. He has no right to deny me my, hello, I'm 50 years old. Who are you? You're not the one that has been given, that spoke to the judge. a couple of months ago on the 28th of July, that I was going to, that's right, that I was going to take the liberty of self-representation and also to file the application myself. You're not the one that's been paid to do the job, because I tell you right now, you might be a constable, police officer, but that's about as far as much authority you got. That's correct. You don't have any authority to overrule or deny my right to self-represent, to speak on my behalf inside the courts, to deal with my application the way I want it, the way I want it to be, represented to the judge. You don't have a right, Mr. Blake. That's correct. You have got a serious problem of arbitrary dictatorships. But I think that when somebody has touched you inappropriately in such a manner that's good, where he has stolen something that he has no right to take, especially if he was already a married man at the time, take it taken. That's correct. Then you can understand why that man thinks he's got a right to dictate to you because you're like his property. That's correct. But that ain't right. I'm sorry. You deserve the death penalty, mister. That's correct. And it's no wonder the police always disrespected you and ignored your complaints all these years, for over 20 years, 20 years since the violation, that something did happen to you on the 24th of June 2003. But of course, he wouldn't give a damn, because he's such an arrogant son of a bitch. He's a racist asshole, white nigger. But he's a typical arrogant brute. That's correct. Oh, Mr. Blake, he only, he doesn't care. I mean, it's like those typical white trash, assholes. They think that it's their right to have sex on the go, to demand sex, let's take sex from any woman. That's correct. Like their tails. They got no respect. No, that's correct. No dignity. But no respect, no manners, no boundaries. That's exactly the kind of attitude of a punk and a thug. That's correct. They take what they think they're entitled to. It's their right. When in actual fact, if later on you should be killed for taking something and alone touching something that doesn't have your name on it, let alone a license, your license on it, then my God, you deserve what you get. That's correct. He has the nerve all this time. There's no doubt he's the same culprit that dictated to Sergeant Candy. Oh, don't serve any of the trespass notices. My God, why not? Am I that not? My goodness. I mean, the fact that I went all that way to serve the trespass notice, I'm actually glad that I didn't serve the trespass notice to an evil man. That's correct. To a horrible, evil man. That's correct. But instead, I served it to his father-in-law, Mr. Barry Morrison. That's correct. And I was thinking to myself, if his wife was a decent woman, there's a saying, behind every good man is a good woman. And I'm afraid if behind every evil man, there must be an evil woman as well. That's correct. But I didn't see that. That's right, Mr. Barry Morrison. I actually preferred him. Rather, yeah, I was actually quite happy to serve him to pass on his trespass notice. That's great. I can't explain to you the feeling I felt. But the feeling of satisfaction, that the peace come over. That's great. That the person that we finally dealt to the evil person that has been dictating to you all these years, and that has been covered up by everybody else. But for you to take my best friend, that's great. Oh no, I think that he really. What do you suggest, Archangel Warren? Does he deserve the death penalty? Maybe it's your call. He says, yes, you do deserve the death penalty, Constable Stuart Beatrice Blake, you do. Isn't it funny? I was sitting there in the courts and listening to the judge, doing his sentencing. And I probably heard about three charges, honey bun? Where 3 police officers were convicting people for assaulting them. And I said to myself, you know what? This is ridiculous. Why is this happening? That's great. How come these 3 coppers, these 3 police officers, got assaulted? One with a pot plant and whatnot, and one also with assault and threatening to, do some harm to his daughter. And I said to myself, there must be a reason why that and one officer had just started work 5 days in, and already he got assaulted. He got assaulted. You know what I put it down to, honey bun? They say what goes around comes around. That's correct. That if they get assaulted, it's probably because that's what they do to their women at home. Well, let's hope that that's not what they do to their women at home. That's correct. If they get assaulted. If they get assaulted, it's probably because they're evil. They're evil. That's correct. Or they're violent. They're violent. That's correct. And the other thing, the reason why they get assaulted is probably because they are so violent that the so-called person who assaulted them, they provoke that side of them. You know what I mean? Some people just have a nature that when people look at them, that's correct, or even come near them, that people are provoked. They want to assault them for some odd reason. I have discovered that there are some people, I think it's their spirit or their attitude, that it provokes some people to want to assault them. That's correct. And it might be because they have a violent streak. And I mean a really, really violent streak. And for sometimes it's karma. Sometimes it's karma. But I think the man that I was seeing that was being up for the charges looked, I think it was probably mental. They put it down to mental issues. They put it down to mental health, mental issues, mental illness. As for me, I put it down to, I think it was what we call regressive. When a victim, that's great, remember, say, past events where maybe those same police officers had done something to that offender, from years back. And of course, they never got back to them. They never were able to get back at the officers. That's great. And then one day, out of the blue, something happens and a trigger sets off in their brain. And they said, right, now he's going to get it. Now he's going to get it. Now I'm going to give it to him. That's great. And that's when it happens, and that's when it happens. And I think that's what happened to the 3 officers. It was more or less, they must have behaved in such a way that it provoked the offender to harm them, to assault them. And I'm sorry, I think sometimes police officers, they need to what? They need to what? They need to be more tolerable. They need to be more tolerable. But more what? I don't want to say more forgiving, because once somebody assaults you, that's it. That's great. It's like once somebody steals my stuff, hey, there's no forgiveness. There's no forgiveness. I have got to punish you. I have got to hold you accountable. But I need to punish you, but I need to discipline you. And that's exactly how I feel. With these offenders inside these criminals inside my address who keep coming in, committing unlawful entries, home invasions, but unlawful entries, that's great. Deliberately, like today. Yeah, I left this address at 12:07 p.m., activating my alarm. And what happened? I came back home at 6:45, disarmed my alarm, and Lord and behold, the light in the lounge is on. That's great. The light in the lounge, this light here. But the light in the hallway is off. So here we go again. I said, why do they need to do that? Why do they need to come inside my flat? That's great. Deliberately to annoy me and to piss the hell out of me. but to aggravate things and just to press my button. Oh my God. These son of a bitches need a death penalty. Yeah, would you like to take the liberty? I'd already sealed the death penalty so many times on that door. That's great. I'd already just made the complaint to the police about it. That's correct. It's unlawful entry. But again, I say to myself, honey bun, the fact that 3 officers were able to convict people for assaulting them at the courts, and I've been having endless complaints coming through the 105 number and even online, and they haven't done anything. They should be arresting them. They should be investigating them. They should be accessing video surveillance outside there via Kangaora. That's correct, in my camera, but more so Kangaora cameras. They should be accessing, screening, and issuing out search warrants. The search for my stolen property that I complained about. Man, what are the police doing? Are they sitting around or they're fucking around? Like my constable, so-called Blake did. That's correct. The fact that, police are able to convict people for especially for crimes of assaults. And yet there's people like me that we're still waiting. We're still waiting for our long piles of, crimes. It's now accumulated. That gets, it's risen to a pile of, manure or a pile of shit. I can barely, it's like there's a backlog of so many complaints that have not been dealt to. And the offenders have just been having a jolly good time laughing about it. Yeah, just like today. I was thinking, oh, not this again, I know. Well, they sure do like to, crush your boundaries, and they don't care. You know what? Here's how it is. You know what? If I was Constable Stuart Blake, I would be able to do his job so well that these guys inside this building would just get arrested all the time. That's correct. I would process them down, enjoy processing them down at the police station and getting them inside the courts to be sentenced. Just like who? John Wayne. Just like John Wayne, the bounty hunter. That's correct. I would be processing them like hotcakes. Bringing them in the courts. That's correct. Behave yourself now. We'll have a little bracelet on your ankle. That's correct. Order of supervision is what you need, or something else is what you need. Maybe 10 years imprisonment might just do it. That's correct for this one. You know what I'm talking about, honey bun? That's right. We've had, how many tenancy managers so far now? We've had Deborah. I've had Deborah, and then I've had Fiona, and now Jason. So, let's hope Jason is going to make it. It's either make it or break it. That's great. But you see, he formerly worked for the Department of Corrections. So in my mind, I'm thinking, if I were in his shoes, because the previous 2 tenancy managers, they didn't do a very good job. They didn't, although the second one wasn't too bad. But the first one was completely, didn't do anything in terms of, you're supposed to breach tenancy agreements. You are supposed to report things to the police. You are supposed to initiate arrest. You are supposed to, put up eviction notice. Nothing. When it came to this person's, my so-called complaints and my distress, this grief, you know what? They still ignore it. They still just acting in omission, ignorance. With the owner, I've made so many complaints of going on, and I think nothing has happened. That's correct. There should be eviction notices. The cameras should be checked. That's correct. Hey, oh my gosh, they've done it again. Right. I've warned them too many times. Give them a what? An eviction notice. That's correct. Get them out. Now, in fact, if I was a tenancy manager in Jason's shoes, and I used to work for the Department of Corrections previously, this is how I would deal. I would check the cameras. That's correct. And the moment I pick up a so-called an unlawful entry, and that gets reported to the police, and then what do I do with it? Then I read the so-called, I get them ready for eviction notice. That's correct. So it takes 3 strikes, not even 3 strikes, 1 strike, and you're out. They'll give you an eviction notice, and then what next? What do? I'll make sure now you're on the streets. So no more tenancy for you. I'll make sure of it. If I was the tenancy manager, I'm not having this again and again. That's great. Because we've got a waiting list. We've got a waiting list of so many people wanting to get a tenancy. And inside this address, we've got some son of a bitches that don't deserve these placements, these tenancy in here, these apartments inside this building. But there are people on the waiting list that deserve them even more so than these assholes inside here. That's correct. So I wouldn't care if I gave them an eviction notice and chucked them out of this building and onto the streets. They're on their own. That's correct. They don't deserve these tenancies. No, they don't. There are people on the waiting list, New Zealand. Don't give me an attitude like, I can't say that because I'm a coconut. And what? Oh, my God. Well, only the Maoris can behave that way and say things like that. Well, I'm not a Maori. You forget I'm not a Maori. I'm a German Samoan. That's right, Pākehā. But of course, you will never accept. That's great. But never mind. I'm a noble and you're not. And that's not my problem. For Deborah to think that, that I didn't have a right to enter your property. And yet, Deborah, you know about what these son of a bitches have been doing. They've been entering my flat. So what's the difference? You hypocrite. Yeah, but you think, so what? My entering your property to serve a trespass notice? Is that serious? But what about these guys trespassing into my flat? What about them? That's correct. You should be what? You shouldn't be that prejudiced, but racist. That's correct. My God. No wonder I'm going to have you arrested at the courts via the restraining order. Would you like that, madam? Easily. I could easily have you arrested because I've got 2 degrees. You don't have any degrees. Although I'll give it to you, you're a tenancy manager. And everybody knows who Deborah is. And she, of course, that's right. But she's not qualified like you. She doesn't own a company. That's correct. You might be on a job seeker, but you're a noble. You know who you are. I sure do. She couldn't do what you are doing right now in the courts, and she wouldn't have the patience, let alone the expertise, that's great, to be able to handle the pressure that what she has put you through at the courts, which is so, that's right. There's stressing, but also, yeah, I mean, a lot of stress, but hey, I can handle it, Deborah. She couldn't handle it at all. That's correct. All Deborah cares about, because her brain is so thick and typically so narrow-minded, that's great, that her right is more important, but all Deborah wants to do is use you. That's great. Take advantage of you so that she can feel like, that she's respected. I don't know what it is, but you must have a magnet for people who want to take advantage of you so that they can get respect. My God, if they want to earn respect, they don't target me for respect. And even to have, for a cherry. I mean, if you target me because you want to earn, an extra income or an extra living, earn a special kind of livelihood, let alone get some special, brownie points, a special award or reward for doing so, my God, you guys can go to hell. That's right. Micken, say that again. Amen. Amen, sister. That's correct. All Deborah wants to do is she just likes to take advantage of you so that she can feel like she's on top of the world, like she's, give her a high self-esteem boost. That's great. To make her feel like she's above you, or that she's more superior, or that she's better than you. Just like Galen, and just like Constable, Blake, he did that so that he could elevate himself to the point of, that you're now a whore. So if he could deflate your status down to a whore, by stealing your cherry, like the way that he did it, and of course that would make him, look like the good guy. My God, for doing so. Now, I don't know what kind of reward he would have gotten for doing that. Did you do that on behalf of the Prezi? Or the KKK, because I actually think it's more a KKK harmful protocol. I know. One that is damn evil, all right. Why didn't you? But I thought white men like you, Mr. Blake, only fuck white women, white trash women. That's correct. You don't fuck any brown women. That's correct. Let alone black ones. But of course, you wouldn't know the difference if you were sick with erythemania. Say that again. He is a sick man. And he doesn't know it. He is sick with erythemania. And possibly sex addiction. He's got a problem. But that ain't my problem. It was never your problem. That's correct. But so is everybody else, every other Dick and Harry out there who has sex with anybody, with everybody. You will be sick with erythemania. Thank God I haven't had sex with anybody like the way that they do it. That's correct. If you have sex with almost every other Dick and Harry, you're bound to be sick with erythemania. Yes, that's correct. That's what happened to Mr. Blake. But that's his problem. That's correct. Nobody told you to touch somebody inappropriately. But nobody told you to be a stupid, dumb-ass, arrogant son of a bitch. That's correct. You ought to be run down and assaulted for what you did, but you ought to be killed. That's right. And yet you don't have the guts. Oh my gosh. You know, I came to your address. I said to myself, you know what? I'm here to serve this trespass notice. And it suddenly dawned on me. You don't live in a mansion. That's correct. You don't own like those expensive big cars. You're just an ordinary guy. You're just an ordinary man. That's correct. A commoner. A poor commoner. I thought, oh my God, 20 years? Is this what you're capable of? Is this the kind of, elevation? Oh my God. Well, it's no wonder your so-called marriage is partnership. Thank God it's not de facto relationship. Because in this side of this building, that's exactly what it is. De facto. It's de facto all the way. Yeah. So you want to look down at me? No. I'm a victim. That's correct. But you see, the victim has got it right. I've been healed by Jesus. That's correct. I've been given a brand new pair of eyes. I've got the Spirit of God, let alone his weapon. That's called what? Well, you wouldn't want me. No, you wouldn't, because I'd smack you down all the time. You wouldn't have a chance. The fact that, here I was thinking that he must be, well off than you. That's correct. And he must be a big man. That's correct. But of course, when I came to serve your notice at your address, I said to myself, my God, how sad. That's great. You're just an ordinary nothing. You're a loser. That's correct. Just like you probably think the same thing of me, but at least I know who I am. That's correct. I'll tell you what. A real man doesn't deflate women. A real man, that's correct, doesn't steal as well, but respects a woman. So the way I see it, if that's what your address looks like, that's correct. And if that's how much you're worth, then you could only have spare wives somewhere or spare partners somewhere else or spare children. That's correct. You're not that special. That's correct. I thought to myself, I feel sorry for your partner. That's correct. But I mean, hey, people shouldn't judge, but they shouldn't judge you. That's correct. But of course, naturally, I would judge the person who actually stole my cherry because my cherry is more valuable. That's correct. I'm more worthy than you, Constable Blake. That's correct. When I looked at your address, I said to myself, my God, this looks like a typical, ordinary family. That's correct. But when I spoke to your father-in-law, he ain't no ordinary person. he's a decent, yes, from a from a wonderful family. That's correct. But of course, that's right. They decent people. They're decent people, but not so powerful and not so decent, not so noble. That's correct. In terms of, well, his wife is a partner, not a wife. That's correct. So if if you are the shit, or if you are the man, that's correct. Then you ought to to know how to elevate your wife to the status of Mrs. Because if she doesn't make it to Mrs., but you deflate her down, down to partner, well, then it's no wonder. Maybe he's got a wife somewhere else, and that is the second wife or the third wife. Let's hope not. I really don't care. I guess, well, what I'm saying is justified. That's correct. And if you think I'm the loser, well, I couldn't be the loser because, well, look where I am and look what I can achieve. Well, on my own, Mr. Blake, that's correct. Of course, in your case, you got the right woman. That's correct. But you see, I don't think you realize the potential because it looks like his woman, is controlled and oppressed. That's correct. Unlike you, Archangel Warren doesn't control me, and he doesn't oppress me, and he doesn't discipline me, let alone torture me, let alone deny me my privileges. This Archangel, that's correct, is so empowering, but is so smart that he tells me stuff. That's correct. But he don't ever tell his honey bun. That's correct. That I couldn't do anything. Or let alone deflate, belittle me, but denigrate me, but lower me my status to a whore. He doesn't do that for me. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. That's why, Mr. Blake, if you're a real man, that's correct. You'd apologize, but of course, if your partner is a Murison, it's not likely to happen, is it? No, because you don't have, like I said, I looked at your address and I said to myself, my God, what a waste, what a waste. And I said to myself, well, if that's what you're capable of, if that is your worth, that's correct. Then you deserve what you got. That's correct. Meaning, jailbird or the death penalty. Oh, you don't ever, the victim, not me, that I reached this stage, I don't ever need to talk to somebody like that. Who's not only sick, but is ignorant, is in denial, and will never take responsibility. That's correct. Never, because he's a coward, That's right. Cowards. Oh, I don't want to say that he's another Jake Heke, because there wasn't that. I didn't see the missus. She was inside. That's correct. Because I could easily look at, tell the sign that somebody is, victim of. But at the moment, that's correct. Let's hope that, what? That it wasn't you that came inside my flat today? Did they give me a payback? I mean, these guys, I know. The guys that are inside this flat, right, they don't know any better. They're criminals, that's great. But why would you people listen to them? And take them seriously. And they're bloody losers. They will always forever be losers. That's great. That's what they do. But as for you, Mr. Constable, Mr. Stewart, well, I hope that, I don't even want to see that man at the courts, but if I have to deal with criminals like that, with evil people like that I need to put a stop to, the Nazi soldiers are just the right people to deal with criminals like these and these sort of punks and thugs, these sort of evil son of a bitches. They are just the kind of people that are able to discipline. They know what it means to discipline and put people down in their places, especially these ones. Let's hope that Jason has got is going to it's going to do his job. Because I can tell you right now, I can do Jason's job any day. Tenancy manager job is a breeze. That's great. These guys wouldn't even be inside this flat, or let's say in this building, if I was the tenancy manager. I wouldn't even allow them to continue on this way. That each and every one of them would have been replaced with a new tenant. And every time a tenant doesn't live up to my standards, where they're breaching their tenancy deliberately, they're entering, committing unlawful entries and that, you'd be out. Sorry. Eviction notice, please. That's correct. 3 strikes, out. Actually, not even 3 strikes. 1 mistake, you're out. That's correct. Because there are probably over 300 people on the waiting list that want to come and occupy the take up residency inside this building or these tenancy. And they deserve them. And they deserve them. Not these son of a bitches here that are being allowed it deliberately by the police to get away with what they do. Just because they're gang members don't mean that what? That you guys can just let them run wild and do what they like, because that's why we got tenancy agreements. That's why we have tenancy managers, because it's their job to manage their antisocial, juvenile, delinquent behaviors. So to make sure that's great, just like the probation officers and correction officers, they need to be disciplined and they need to be taught their boundaries and they need to be, that's right. You need to have zero tolerance. But of course, if the police aren't going to do their job, my God, maybe we do need the Nazi soldiers. I'm afraid we do, especially for me, not for New Zealand, but for me personally. That's correct. I don't need to go down to the fire engine and ask, take the liberty of taking advantage and ask Mr. Fire Engine, can you do something about these son of a bitches inside this address? Can you stop the unlawful entries? And other arbitrary dictatorships, Mr. Fire Engine, I really appreciate that if you could do that. If you could also give each and everyone a big hiding from me. Right? Because I don't want to do it with them. I would prefer the Nazi soldiers just to put them into their misery and put them out of their misery. That's correct. So, one more final wrap up with this preaching. You all know that what? So on the 18th of November, my church TV will close at 10 p.m. and it will go private, so only my friends will be the ones who'll be able to access. But it will be that way until the 30th of January. So you all better be prepared for it. So you will have to, share my videos to your Facebook. But that's it. I will be waiting for the Nazi soldiers to arrive on the 30th of January by that date, because that's the date of my defendant hearing. But file your restraining orders now. And that's correct. Now, as for the list of those men, that's right, that are on the that I mentioned about so-called Mr. Blake's so-called ridiculous arbitrary dictatorships. Right, they've all got a problem. They have all got a problem. They're all harmful, but this country is actually very harmful. They are harmful, all right. Indeed. As for the judge, well, I'm not a commoner, Your Honor. I'm a noble. So, I could easily arrest that judge. Yes, I could. On a restraining order. With Deborah and the rest of them. Deborah is so petty, but I think the KKK, you guys, are the ones that deserve the death penalty from the Nazi soldiers. You are by far the worst kind of criminals I have ever, kind of pest, ever been dealt to. Especially Anthony Shaw. Well, he's a KKK member. Yeah, he's definitely a KKK. With Constable Blake, Mr. Blake, is definitely a KKK. And a lot of them are actually, a lot of the police are KKK. Now, this is probably why we're not getting the job done properly. And people like us, we get harmed all the time. Just because some asshole decided to set you up to be declared, with a lying mental disorder, does not mean that I'm not capable of making the right decisions, or that you got a right to ignore my complaints, and, and not care about my distress. If the three police who were assaulted, that's great, were able to convict the offenders that committed those crimes against their persons, then that means if your lives, but if your pain mattered that much, then I would say the same thing for me, that my pain and my suffering also matters very much. If I'm a director, I'm a noble, I'm a national master, that's great. And I'm also an educated person. I'm qualified. I got 2 degrees. That's great. Jesus Christ. Then I matter. And I've got intellectual property. I've got a kingdom that's been open all this time. Yeah, for your people to help, try to help yourself. So, like I said, I have probably helped a lot of people out there, especially with your mental illness. That's great. And other issues to sort out in your private lives. That's great. So while I'm busy doing my own stuff, you are also helping yourselves. So the way I see it, if the police so-called, their pain and distress mattered, that the culprits or the offenders had to be disciplined and they had to be arrested, then I feel the same way. I feel the same way. That means my distress, my pains, my complaints, they matter. They should matter. But unfortunately, because the police is so racist, and in the locals, the people that's great are so racist and arrogant and selfish, that what? Do you completely ignore? Do you completely ignore? If that's the case, why are you entering my kingdom? Why do you even bother listening to my preachings? But why do you need to enter my kingdom and access it? If I don't matter to you, that's correct. And if you don't care, well, then why should I care about any of you? If I close my kingdom, that's great, make it private. Why should I care? I mean, you don't care, that's great. But you probably have more. You're more worthy. You have more heart than any of them. But they don't deserve to be, they don't deserve you. That's correct. I know that. Right. You have a nice evening. File your restraining orders. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.